It's time to set your lineups for week 12, and you need to know who to start in the quarterback position to win your fantasy matchup. Well, don't worry, SI's fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano is joining me now with that insight. Fabs, let's start with the QBs that you like for this week.
Cam Newton, he's been Superman lately, right? Looking at his numbers, he's averaged nearly 20 fantasy points per game since week 8. He's rushed for 4 touchdowns in that time. He's got 9 rushing touchdowns on the season. That's always big from a fantasy perspective. He's got the Cardinals this week. Their defense has allowed an average of nearly 20 points per game to quarterbacks. They've also allowed the 3rd most rushing yards to signal callers, which is big. So Cam is a top 12 play this week. And so is Taysom Hill. Not eligible at tight end anymore, but he's still a quarterback, and he gave you more than 24 fantasy points last week against Atlanta. This week, he's got the Broncos. Their defense has allowed an average of over 18 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. In fact, they have given up 4 20-point performances to signal callers, including Sam Darnold, who plays for the Jets and isn't all that good. So Taysom Hill is a player that I would start. Are you ready for this, Kaitlin? Over Lamar Jackson this week. Welcome to 2020.
Wow, that is impressive to hear, Fabs. Good insight, though. Let's talk about 2 more quarterbacks that are also on your list. Tom Brady versus the Kansas City Chiefs and Derek Carr versus the Falcons. But who are the QBs that fantasy managers should stay away from, Fabs?
Carson Wentz scares me. I know the matchup's really good this week against Seattle, but his numbers have been horrible. I mean, he's failed to score 15 fantasy points in a game since week 7. He's turning the ball over way too much. He's got 14 picks already. Seattle, now, they have been bad against quarterbacks, I get it, but lately they've been better. The last 2 quarterbacks to face them have only averaged 15 fantasy points per game, including Jared Goff, who is held to 10.5. So I'm fading Wentz on Monday Night Football. And then Baker Mayfield, kind of the same thing. The matchup's actually really good this week, but I just don't trust Baker. He's had 1 game with more than 16 fantasy points this season. That's it. And it was against the Cincinnati Bengals. And about a third of his touchdown passes came in 1 game against Cincinnati. And the Jaguars defense has actually held 2 of the last 3 visiting quarterbacks to fewer than 17 fantasy points, including Ben Roethlisberger last week. So I know the matchup looks good. I think the Browns are going to run the football a lot, and this is not going to be a good game script situation for Baker Mayfield, who, oh, by the way, just isn't a good fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, you can't trust him. And other guys that you can't trust this week, Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins. Fabs, thanks so much for your insight. For more insight and Sports Illustrated's award-winning weekly player rankings, get your membership to SI Fantasy Plus for just $14.99 a month.